Imagine standing among the silent, weathered stones of an ancient city, where every pathway, every temple, every gateway aligns with breathtaking precision to the distant horizon. It wasn't by chance, it wasn't just for beauty. This was a deliberate, sacred act, one born from a profound and haunting relationship with the sky above. Why would our earliest ancestors invest so much labor, so much heart, into orienting their entire world to the movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars? What did they see when they looked up that filled them with both wonder and dread? This is one of humanity's oldest and most captivating mysteries, why the first cities aligned to the horizon and what they truly feared about the sky. From the sun-baked ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the monumental pyramids along the Nile, these structures were far more than shelters or symbols of power. They were cosmic mirrors, deliberate reflections of the heavens here on Earth. Our ancestors weren't just building cities, they were attempting to harmonize with forces infinitely greater than themselves. They studied the celestial dance not as detached observers, but as participants in a fragile balance, believing that any misstep, any deviation from this sacred order, could invite disaster, divine anger, or cosmic chaos into their world. Their urban plans were prayers in stone, rituals etched into the landscape, designed to appease, to protect, and to comprehend the vast unknown unfolding above them. In this video, we're setting out on a journey across time and cultures to explore how ancient beliefs about omens, gods, and celestial events shaped the very foundations of civilization. We'll uncover what these precise alignments reveal about humanity's deepest anxieties and greatest hopes, our timeless urge to find order in chaos, meaning in the movement of the stars, and security beneath an often unpredictable sky. So join me as we listen closely to the stones that still whisper their stories and step into the minds of those who first dared to build their world in conversation with the cosmos. Picture the world's first cities rising from the fertile plains of Mesopotamia around 4000 BCE. These were not random collections of buildings, they were deliberate, conscious acts of creation. In places like Uruk and Eridu, the earliest urban planners were not just engineers or kings, they were priests and sky watchers. They gazed upward not merely in wonder, but with a profound sense of purpose, searching for order in what must have felt like a chaotic and often terrifying universe. The sky above them was not an empty space, it was a dynamic, living map, a divine blueprint for how to live on Earth. Every sunrise, every star's path, every seasonal shift was a line in that blueprint, and to ignore it was to risk everything. This is why the very streets and temples of these first cities were meticulously oriented to celestial events. The main axis of a city might align with the rising sun on the summer solstice, bathing the central temple in a dramatic golden light. The gates could be positioned to frame the setting of a particularly important star, like Sirius or Venus. These alignments were not arbitrary artistic choices. As noted by Archaeoastronomer Anthony Aveni, they were a fundamental response to a deep human need to harmonize with the cosmic forces that governed life and death. There was a pervasive belief that a city in sync with the heavens would be blessed with fertile fields, predictable seasons, and the protection of the gods. Conversely, a misaligned city was an affront to the divine order, an open invitation for disaster, drought, or invasion. The horizon itself was seen as a sacred boundary, the meeting point between the human realm and the divine. By building their cities to mirror the sky's patterns, our ancestors were effectively drawing that celestial order down to Earth. The entire urban layout became a ritual landscape, a permanent stage for the drama of human and divine interaction. A processional way wasn't just a road, it was the path of a god. A ziggurat wasn't just a tall building, it was a symbolic mountain, a ladder between worlds. This fusion of astronomy and architecture was the ultimate tool for creating stability. In a world where a sudden storm could wipe out a harvest, or an unexpected eclipse could spark panic, aligning a city to the predictable cycles of the cosmos was a way to impose a framework of certainty onto an unpredictable world. It was a declaration that even amidst the chaos, humanity could find and build a pocket of divine order. This foundational act of merging sky and earth set the stage for all the specific celestial fears and meticulous observations that would follow, embedding a cosmic anxiety right into the very stones of civilization. Now imagine that Babylonian priest standing atop a ziggurat under a vault of stars, his eyes fixed on the heavens not in wonder but in sheer dread. A sudden streak of light, a comet cuts through the darkness. His heart pounds. This is no beautiful spectacle. It is a terrifying omen, a direct message from the gods that could foretell the death of a king, the outbreak of a devastating war, or a famine that would wipe out his entire city. For ancient peoples, the sky was a living, breathing text, and every unexpected event within it was a sentence of divine judgment waiting to be decoded. This was a world where the cosmos spoke, and its language was one of portents and peril. This profound fear is meticulously detailed in ancient texts like the Enuma Anu Enlil, a vast collection of Babylonian clay tablets that served as a manual for interpreting the sky's messages. These tablets catalog countless celestial events and their corresponding earthly consequences. A lunar eclipse, for instance, was not an astronomical curiosity. It was believed to signal the anger of a powerful deity like Ishtar or Marduk, often interpreted as a direct threat to the ruling monarch. The prescribed response was a complex set of ritual substitute kings would be enthroned to absorb the divine wrath, only to be quietly disposed of once the danger was believed to have passed. This wasn't superstition, it was a state-sponsored science of survival, a deeply held belief that the stability of the entire kingdom depended on correctly reading and appeasing the moods of the sky. The fear was rooted in the capricious nature of these divine messages. The sky was seen as a realm of pure will, where the gods could change their minds without warning. A planet like Mars, associated with the god Nergal, might appear brighter one season, signaling his approach and an imminent outbreak of war or plague. A sudden meteor shower could be interpreted as a rain of divine arrows, targeting a specific city for punishment. Even more common phenomena, like a particularly vivid red sky at dawn, could be read as a blood omen, a sign that the gods were displeased and that catastrophe was looming unless immediate action was taken. This constant state of vigilance turned the sky into a source of existential anxiety. You could never fully relax. The next sign of doom could appear at any moment. This is the critical context that explains the obsessive drive for perfect urban alignment we discussed earlier. Orienting a temple to the solstice sunrise or a city gate to a specific star wasn't just an act of worship, it was a profound defensive strategy. By aligning their physical world with the perceived order of the heavens, ancient rulers and priests were effectively building a metaphysical shield. They were creating a harmonious resonance between earth and sky, hoping to demonstrate to the gods that their city was in accordance with the divine plan. A correctly aligned city was a polite city, one that showed respect and understanding, and was therefore less likely to be targeted for divine retribution. In the face of a chaotic and unpredictable cosmos, these stone alignments were humanity's way of pleading for order, desperately trying to convince the powers above that they were listening and that they were worthy of protection. This urgent need to decode the sky's warnings with ever greater accuracy would soon drive them to create the world's first sophisticated astronomical tools. Step into the shoes of an Egyptian astronomer priest on the banks of the Nile just before dawn. In your hands, you hold a simple yet profound tool, a merkit. This isn't just a piece of wood with a slit in it, it's your window to the divine order. You align its sighting notch with a fellow priest across a calibrated plumb line, your eyes fixed on a specific star as it makes its final descent. The moment it disappears below the horizon, you note its position. This precise observation, repeated night after night, allows you to track the slow, steady drift of the stars, predicting the annual flooding of the Nile with life-saving accuracy. This was the reality of ancient astronomy, a beautiful marriage of simple technology and profound intellectual achievement. These early instruments were marvels of ingenuity. The merkit, for instance, was essentially a precursor to the modern theodolite, used for aligning temples and pyramids to true north with an error margin of less than a fraction of a degree. Then there was the humble gnomon, a vertical stick placed in the ground. By meticulously tracking the length and direction of its shadow throughout the day and across the seasons, these ancient scientists could determine the solstices and equinoxes, the very pillars of their calendar. In Mesopotamia, they used water clocks clepsydras to measure the passage of time at night, correlating the flow of water with the movement of stars across the sky. And we cannot forget the incredible star charts, like the 3 stars each texts from Babylon, which carefully catalogued the risings and settings of key stars and constellations, turning the vault of heaven into a readable, predictable clock. But this knowledge wasn't confined to handheld tools. The greatest astronomical instruments were the landscapes and structures themselves. As historian Otto Neugebauer demonstrated, places like the Nabta Playa stone circle in the Sahara Desert, which predates Stonehenge by over 1,000 years, functioned as a massive calendrical device. Its carefully placed megaliths align with the summer solstice sunrise and the zenith stars, proving that Neolithic peoples were sophisticated celestial observers. Stonehenge is, of course, the most famous example, a complex arrangement of stones that marks not only the solstices, but also likely predicts eclipses and tracks the cycles of the moon. These were not just temples, they were permanent observatories, giant computers in stone designed to harmonize human activity with the cosmos. The driving force behind this ever-increasing precision was a potent mix of the practical and the spiritual. On a purely earthly level, knowing when to plant and when to harvest was a matter of survival. A miscalculation could lead to famine, but the stakes were perceived to be infinitely higher. A mistake in reading the sky wasn't just a scientific error, it was a theological catastrophe. If a priest mispredicted an eclipse, it could be seen as a failure to appease an angry god. If a temple was misaligned by even a small amount, it might be interpreted by the people as the king losing the favor of the deities, potentially leading to social unrest and challenges to his divine authority. This fear of divine displeasure provided the urgent, relentless motivation to refine their tools and hone their observations to an ever finer edge. This astronomical prowess became the ultimate source of power for the ruling class. A king or pharaoh who could accurately predict the flooding of the Nile or the coming of the seasons wasn't just a good administrator, he was a divine intermediary. By reading the sky, he demonstrated a unique connection to the gods, proving that his rule was part of the cosmic order itself. This claim to divine authority, backed by the seemingly magical ability to forecast celestial events, legitimized their power, centralized their control, and justified the immense social effort required to build the aligned cities and monuments we marvel at today. The tools of the astronomer priest were, therefore, not just instruments of measurement, but the very foundations of political power and social order in the ancient world. Now take that fundamental anxiety about celestial omens and magnify it 1,000-fold. This was not just a fear of a single bad sign. It was a deep, existential terror that the entire cosmic order could suddenly and violently come undone. For ancient peoples, the universe was not a collection of random, mechanical bodies. It was a delicate, living system of balance and harmony. The sky was its most visible and volatile component, and any perceived disorder there, a planet moving erratically, a comet appearing out of season, an eclipse at the wrong time, was not just a warning. It was a crack in the very foundation of reality, a sign that chaos was breaking through and that the carefully constructed order of earthly life was about to be swept away. This concept had a name in many cultures. In Egypt, it was Ma'at, a term that meant truth, justice, order, and cosmic balance all at once. The pharaoh was the guardian of Ma'at, and his primary duty was to ensure that Egypt remained in harmony with the cycles of the gods and the heavens. A failure to do so, a neglect of the rituals or a misalignment of the temples, could cause Ma'at to crumble, allowing its opposite, Isfit, chaos, falsehood, and disorder, to flood into the world. This wasn't a metaphor, a drought, a plague, a foreign invasion. These were all tangible manifestations of Isfit winning the eternal struggle. The Greek poet Hesiod vividly captures a similar dread in his works and days, where he describes a time of cosmic justice. He warns that when humans become unjust and break their sacred oaths, Zeus himself becomes angered and brings calamity upon them, often signaled by portents in the sky. The message was clear: human misbehavior could literally upset the balance of the cosmos, and the sky would reflect that imbalance back to Earth in the form of punishment. This fear is powerfully encoded in the world's oldest creation myths, which are almost universally stories about a heroic god imposing order upon a primordial and terrifying chaos. The most striking example comes from Babylon. Their great epic, the Enuma Elish, tells of the god Marduk's epic battle against Tiamat, the monstrous, dragon-like goddess of the Salt Sea, who represents primeval, undifferentiated chaos. Marduk defeats her in a colossal struggle, and from her slaughtered body he fashions the entire ordered universe. He pinions her corpse to create the sky's dome. He sets the stars in their courses. He establishes the cycles of the moon and sun. But the crucial, haunting subtext of this story is that Tiamat is not gone. Her chaotic essence is merely contained, held at bay by the divine order Marduk established. Every unexpected storm, every eclipse, every comet was seen as a momentary resurgence of Tiamat's power, a flicker of the old chaos threatening to break its bonds and reduce the world to formless nothingness once more. This is the profound psychological context that makes sense of those painstaking urban alignments. When an ancient architect ensured a temple's doorway framed the rising sun on the equinox, he wasn't just performing a ritual. He was actively holding the line against chaos. He was reinforcing Marduk's victory over Tiamat. He was upholding the pharaoh's duty to maintain Ma'at. The city, in its perfect celestial orientation, became a fortress against disorder. Its walls were not just defenses against human enemies, they were metaphysical barriers against the encroaching void. Every aligned street was a thread in a cosmic net, designed to catch and hold the universe together. This was a desperate, collective attempt by humanity to impose stability on a cosmos that often seemed indifferent at best and actively malevolent at worst. They built their world as a mirror of the heavens, not out of simple admiration, but as a desperate plea and a powerful spell. As above, so below. Let the order there be reflected here. Keep the chaos at bay. This deeply ingrained belief that the gods were the ultimate arbiters of this order and that they would personally intervene to punish any deviation is what we must understand next. Now, visualize the sheer, palpable terror that would grip an entire Sumerian city-state when the skies darkened not with rain, but with the unmistakable fury of the god Enlil. As the supreme deity of the pantheon, Enlil held the Tablet of Destinies, granting him authority over the fundamental forces of the universe. Ancient hymns describe him not as a distant, benevolent father, but as a volatile and terrifying power who could unleash the Melam, a terrifying divine radiance that manifested as devastating storms, plagues, or invasions if he was displeased. And what was one of the surest ways to provoke his wrath? A temple whose gates were no longer perfectly aligned to the path of the stars, or a sacred statue that had been moved even slightly from its ordained, astronomically determined position. This was not a vague spiritual failing. It was a precise cosmic error, a literal misstep in the sacred dance between heaven and earth, and the punishment was believed to be swift and catastrophic. This worldview is etched into the very fabric of ancient literature. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest stories, repeatedly shows gods acting on impulsive, often violent emotions. They decide to wipe out humanity with a great flood not because people are evil, but because their noise is annoying. The message is clear. The divine will is capricious and absolute, and human survival depends on meticulous adherence to their rules. This is where the profound, practical necessity of realignment rituals comes in. As Assyriologist Stephanie Daly's work reveals, the Babylonian New Year festival, the Akitu, was far more than a celebration. It was an essential annual reset for the entire cosmos. During this ceremony, the statues of the gods were ritually removed from their temples, cleaned, and most importantly, reoriented and realigned to their correct celestial bearings before being returned to their pedestals. This wasn't mere housekeeping, it was a critical maintenance of the universal order. If the god's statue was not facing the correct star or point on the horizon, it was believed the deity would literally be unable to see the prayers of the people, leaving the city vulnerable and adrift in a hostile universe. We can see how this belief played out in the interpretation of real-world disasters. Take, for instance, the cataclysmic eruption of Thera around 1600 BCE, a volcanic event so immense it likely inspired the later Greek myth of Atlantis, and may have even influenced the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah. For the Minoan civilization on nearby Crete, this was an incomprehensible catastrophe, a rain of fire and ash from the sky, followed by colossal tsunamis. How could they possibly understand this through any lens other than their existing beliefs? The most logical conclusion was that they had somehow failed their gods. Perhaps a temple had been built askew or a key ritual had been neglected. The gods were angry, and this was their punishment. This interpretation would have been reinforced by priests and rulers who held the knowledge of the celestial codes. A natural disaster became a divine verdict, a terrifying lesson in the consequences of impiety. This fear, in turn, became the ultimate tool for social and political control. A king was not just a political leader, he was the primary intermediary between the people and the volatile heavens. His ability to commission correctly aligned temples and perform the proper rituals was his claim to legitimacy. He could point to a period of prosperity and say, "See, my alignment of the ziggurat to the Pleiades has secured Enlil's favor." Conversely, when famine or disease struck, he could deflect blame onto a rival priestly faction for a ritual error or onto the people themselves for a collective lack of piety. The complex science of astronomy and architecture was thus wrapped in a layer of religious secrecy, accessible only to the elite. This knowledge was power, the power to explain misfortune, to promise salvation, and to demand absolute obedience in the monumental, back-breaking labor required to keep the city in celestial harmony. The stones of their cities were heavy, but the fear of divine wrath was infinitely heavier, pressing down on every aspect of life and making perfect alignment a non-negotiable requirement for survival itself. Now picture Gudea, the ruler of the ancient city-state of Lagash, kneeling in the dust of a construction site, his eyes not on the blueprints before him, but fixed on the night sky. He is not merely a king giving orders, he is a student, a supplicant, awaiting instruction from his priestly advisors. Their collective focus is on the brilliant star Sirius, whose first pre-dawn rising, known as its heliacal rising, signaled the life-giving floods of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. To orient his new temple, the Ninu, to this celestial event was to physically tether his city's prosperity to the cycles of the cosmos. Gudea and his priests were performing a role fundamental to all early civilizations. They were the essential intermediaries, the living conduits between the terrifying, unknowable heavens and the fragile human world below. Their unique authority did not come from military might alone, but from their claimed ability to interpret the divine will written in the stars and to act upon it, thereby shielding their people from celestial wrath. This sacred partnership is immortalized in the very words they left behind. The Gudea cylinders, two large clay rolls inscribed with his story, provide an astonishingly detailed account. They describe how the god Ningirsu, the patron deity of Lagash, appeared to Gudea in a dream vision. The god did not simply command a temple be built, he provided the specific celestial measurements. The text reveals that the god himself fixed the holy star, the pure star above the horizon, for the temple's orientation and laid out its plan, making Gudea the human instrument of a divine architectural decree. This was the ultimate source of legitimacy. A king could point to this divine mandate and say, "This is not my will, but the will of the god. The alignment of this temple is a direct command from heaven." It transformed a massive public works project from a king's vanity into a collective religious duty, a necessary act of survival mandated by the powers that controlled their universe. To become such an intermediary required a lifetime of intense, specialized training. A young apprentice priest astronomer in Mesopotamia would spend decades mastering the vast and complex body of knowledge contained in texts like the Enuma Anu in Lil. This was not a theoretical science, it was a rigorous discipline of memorization and precise observation. They had to know by heart the paths of planets, the fixed positions of stars, and the intricate calendar of celestial events. They learned to recognize the subtle omens, a halo around the moon, the color of a planet, the timing of an eclipse, and the specific rituals needed to avert the predicted disasters. This knowledge was often guarded within powerful families or temple schools, creating a scholarly elite whose members alone could read the sky. Their expertise made them indispensable advisors to the king, and their pronouncements directly influenced the most practical aspects of urban design. The width of a main thoroughfare might be determined by the procession needed for a specific star-related festival. The placement of a city gate could be aligned to the setting sun on a solstice, turning a simple defensive structure into a sacred aperture framing a divine event. This system, born from a genuine fear of the sky, inevitably forged a powerful social hierarchy. The king, as the primary intermediary, and the priests, as his technical advisors, sat at the apex of a pyramid of power that rested on the backs of thousands. The construction of a single correctly aligned ziggurat or temple complex required the mobilization of an entire society: quarrymen, bricklayers, carpenters, carters, and laborers, all diverted from farming or other trades. This consumption of vast resources and human effort was justified by the existential threat they believed they were mitigating. The elites provided celestial security, and in return, the populace provided their labor and obedience. It was a perfect, self-reinforcing cycle. The fear of divine punishment legitimized the king's authority, which demanded the construction of aligned monuments, which required centralized control over people and resources, which further reinforced the king's authority. The sky's terror, therefore, did not just shape architecture. It was the bedrock upon which the very first centralized states and their political systems were built, creating a template of power that would echo for millennia. This absolute necessity for precision in their sacred constructions would soon lead them to develop and rely upon a sophisticated and mysterious language of form and function, the principles of sacred geometry. Now, let's pull back the curtain on the methods behind this astonishing precision. Forget modern lasers and GPS. The primary toolkit of these ancient master builders was deceptively simple: ropes, wooden stakes, and an intimate, hard-won knowledge of geometry. A team of Egyptian surveyors known as harpodonapti, or rope stretchers, would begin their work long before the first stone was ever cut. Their most sacred tool was a knotted rope, soaked in water to prevent stretching and meticulously calibrated. They knew that by stretching this rope in a 3-4-5 ratio, they could create a perfect right angle, a practical application of what we now call the Pythagorean theorem, millennia before Pythagoras was even born. This perfect angle was the foundational cornerstone, literally and spiritually, for aligning an entire temple complex or city grid to the cardinal directions with an accuracy that still baffles engineers today. This was far more than simple construction. It was the application of sacred geometry. This was a world where certain numbers, shapes, and ratios were believed to be divinely inspired, the very language the universe used to create order from chaos. The circle, for instance, was seen as the most perfect shape, symbolizing the heavens, eternity, and the cyclical nature of time. The square represented the Earth with its 4 cardinal directions and stable, grounded energy. Combining them created the squaring of the circle, a profound symbolic act of uniting the celestial with the terrestrial. This is why so many ancient temples and altars, from the Vedic fire altars of India to the foundations of Mesopotamian ziggurats, were built using precise geometric formulas that encoded these cosmic principles. As researcher John Anthony West profoundly argued, the precision of a structure like the Great Pyramid of Giza, aligned to true north with an error of just 3/60ths of a degree, is not merely a display of technical skill. It is a profound philosophical and theological statement, a physical manifestation of the belief that mathematical perfection could attract and channel divine energy, or mat, into the human realm. Different cultures developed their own intricate systems to codify this sacred mathematics. In India, the Vedic texts known as the Sulba Sutras, composed centuries before Euclid, provided detailed geometric instructions for constructing fire altars of specific shapes and sizes. The accuracy of a sacrifice, and thus its efficacy in maintaining cosmic order, depended on the altar's perfect proportions. A deviation of even a finger's width in the geometry was believed to render the ritual void, or worse, bring misfortune. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the Romans would later institutionalize this practice with the science of grammatics, a formalized system of land surveying using an instrument called a groma to lay out their military camps and new cities with perfectly perpendicular streets, aligning them to the sun's path as a symbol of Roman order conquering earthly chaos. The driving force behind this mathematical obsession was the terrifying consequence of error. A misaligned structure wasn't just an architectural failure, it was a cosmological catastrophe. If a temple was supposed to be a conduit for heavenly energy, a building angled even slightly wrong was like a blocked artery, preventing the flow of divine blessing and protection. It could be seen as an insult to the gods, a willful distortion of their perfect cosmic blueprint. This belief invested every measurement, every stretched rope, and every placed stake with immense spiritual significance. The surveyor wasn't just a technician, he was a guardian of cosmic order, his work ensuring that the human world remained in resonant harmony with the divine. This incredible mathematical rigor, born from a blend of deep piety and genuine fear, provided the precise framework upon which they would then layer rich, complex layers of symbolism, turning their cities into nothing less than three-dimensional maps of the universe itself. Walking through the ancient city of Teotihuacan is like stepping into a living, breathing model of the universe. The vast Avenue of the Dead doesn't just connect pyramids, it serves as a terrestrial echo of the Milky Way, a sacred pathway ritually aligned to the Pleiades star cluster. When that constellation reached its zenith in the night sky, it was believed the souls of the dead traveled along this celestial river, and the city's main thoroughfare became their earthly conduit. This was urban planning as theology. Every single element, from the towering pyramid of the sun to the intricate drainage channels, was meticulously placed not for mere utility, but as a profound symbolic act. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia and the pyramids of Egypt shared this same sacred purpose. They weren't just impressive buildings. They were artificial mountains, constructed to physically bridge the gap between the human world below and the realm of the gods above. They were launch pads for the soul and landing points for divine energy. This symbolic language was drawn directly from creation myths. Mesoamerican codices, like the Borgia Codex, describe the world's creation emerging from a primordial sea. In response, the vast central plaza of Teotihuacan, surrounded by its massive temples, was designed to represent this chaotic watery beginning, with the surrounding structures symbolizing the ordered earth rising from it. The pyramids themselves were more than tombs or temples. They were conceived as portals or tzitzimaim, believed to be points where the veil between worlds was thinnest. A priest climbing their steep steps wasn't just ascending a structure, he was reenacting the cosmic journey of a deity, moving from the earthly realm toward the celestial. This transformed the entire city from a collection of buildings into a ritual landscape, a permanent stage where the drama of creation could be symbolically reenacted daily, ensuring the sun would rise again and the cosmic order would hold. This practice of encoding cosmic beliefs into city layouts was a global phenomenon, though each culture expressed it through its own unique environmental and theological lens. In Egypt, the entire civilization was a reflection of the heavens. The Nile River was their terrestrial counterpart to the celestial Milky Way. Their cities and temples were meticulously oriented not only to cardinal directions, but also to the river's north-south flow, creating a perfect mirror of the heavens above. A temple's axis was often aligned so that the light of a specific star, like Sirius, whose heliacal rising heralded the Nile's annual flood, would penetrate deep into the inner sanctum on a particular night, illuminating the statue of the god within. This wasn't a light show, it was the god physically accepting the ritual and reaffirming their presence and power, a direct and predictable dialogue between the earth and the sky that reinforced a sense of divine stability. Meanwhile, in China, the principles of Feng Shui governed urban design, a complex system aimed at harmonizing human habitation with the invisible energies of the earth and cosmos. The ancient capital cities like Chang'an were laid out as perfect squares aligned with the cardinal directions, mirroring the perceived shape of the world. This was done to harness Kai, or cosmic energy, and to align the emperor's rule with the mandate of heaven. Mountains to the north provided protection, rivers curved gently to gather positive energy, and every gate and major building was positioned according to the intricate patterns of the stars and constellations to ensure health, prosperity, and divine favor. To build a city out of alignment was to risk channeling negative Shah energy, which could bring disaster, drought, and the downfall of a dynasty. Even the Greeks, often celebrated for their rational philosophy, deeply embedded celestial symbolism into their urban centers. Their cities were frequently oriented to honor specific deities. The sacred site of Delphi, for instance, was not randomly chosen. It was believed to be the Omphalos, the navel of the world, determined by Zeus releasing two eagles from opposite ends of the earth and having them meet at that spot. Temples were meticulously aligned to the rising or setting of a patron god's associated star or constellation on a feast day. The Parthenon in Athens is subtly aligned so that on the festival of the Panathenaea, the sunrise would cast a specific beam of light through the eastern doorway, illuminating the colossal statue of Athena Parthenos. This precise alignment physically demonstrated the goddess's glory and favor, reinforcing Athenian cultural identity and their belief that their city was under her direct, watchful protection. Ultimately, these symbolic layouts provided something priceless, a profound sense of security in a terrifyingly unpredictable world. By making their cities a precise mirror of the cosmos, ancient peoples created a powerful illusion of control. They were building a home within a universe they understood, a universe where they had a designated and secure place. Walking through a city whose streets aligned with the stars, whose temples reached for the heavens, and whose plazas represented the very beginning of time was a constant, comforting reassurance. It was a daily reminder that they lived within a sacred diagram, a divinely ordained order that could, through correct ritual and alignment, be maintained against the ever-lurking threat of chaos. This shared symbolic language forged an unbreakable bond between the people, their rulers, and their environment, creating a cultural identity that was literally set in stone, a permanent claim to a place in the cosmic order. This incredible diversity in celestial interpretation reveals a fundamental truth. While the deep-seated fear of the sky was a universal human experience, the way each civilization chose to confront and codify that fear was uniquely their own, painted in the vibrant colors of their local environment, their political structure, and their spiritual imagination. Take a journey to ancient China, and you'll find a cosmology centered on absolute, unwavering order. The Forbidden City in Beijing is a masterclass in this philosophy. Its precise north-south alignment wasn't just for symmetry, it was a direct earthly echo of the pole star, which the Chinese saw as the immutable, unmoving center of the celestial realm. The Emperor, the Son of Heaven, was the human counterpart to that star. His throne was placed directly on that central axis, physically embodying his role as the pivotal anchor of all creation, the sole person responsible for maintaining harmony between the human world and the cosmos. A single degree of deviation in the palace's orientation wouldn't just be an architectural error. It would be a direct challenge to the mandate of heaven, a dangerous wobble in the very axis of the universe that could bring about floods, rebellions, and famine. Now travel across the world to the Andes Mountains and witness a completely different expression of the same celestial urge. The Inca city of Cusco was not designed on a grid of right angles, but in the shape of a giant puma, a sacred animal. But this was more than just a symbolic animal shape. Its contours and the lines of its major streets were meticulously engineered to align with specific celestial events, particularly the rise and set of the Milky Way, which they visualized as a great celestial river. Teotihuacans, or sacred shrines, were placed throughout the city to mark the zenith of certain stars or the solstice sunrises. Their entire understanding of the cosmos was deeply tied to their dramatic topography. Mountain peaks, or apus, were themselves considered sacred celestial beings. So for the Inca, aligning their city wasn't about imposing a geometric order from above. but about weaving their architecture into the existing sacred landscape of mountains and stars, creating a seamless tapestry of earth and sky that affirmed their place within a living, breathing universe. These stark contrasts show how culture shaped cosmic fear. In Mesopotamia, the terror was deeply personal and political. They looked at the red glow of Mars and saw Nergal, the god of war, pestilence, and the underworld. His erratic movements across the sky were not a scientific curiosity. They were a divine threat assessment, a celestial forecast for impending invasion or plague that would send priests scurrying to perform apotropaic rituals to protect the king and the state. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, the Maya gaze was fixed on the relentless turning of vast calendar cycles. Their dread was not of an angry god in the moment, but of a cosmic expiration date. They believed time itself was cyclical, and that at the end of a major cycle, like the much-debated 13th Bacton that concluded in 2012, the universe was vulnerable to a total reset, a collapse of the world as they knew it, and a return to primordial chaos. This fear motivated an obsessive precision in their astronomy, driving them to build observatories like the Caracol at Chichen Itza to track the complex cycles of Venus with breathtaking accuracy, all in an effort to predict and perhaps ritually avert the potential apocalypse. As anthropologist Brian Fagan has so eloquently illustrated, these interpretations were never formed in a vacuum. They were profoundly shaped by the immediate environment and its challenges. In India, the relentless, life-giving rhythm of the monsoon rains dictated everything. This environmental reality was baked directly into their sacred architecture. Vedic altars, used for the crucial fire sacrifices that maintained cosmic order, were not aligned to cardinal points alone. They were carefully oriented to channel the seasonal winds, to invite the rains, and to honor the divine forces responsible for agriculture. The geometry of the altar itself was believed to influence the weather. Its correct construction and alignment were a matter of literal survival, a way to use celestial principles to ensure the arrival of the rains that would prevent drought and famine. Similarly, the Navajo people of North America built their hogans, their traditional dwellings, with their doorways facing east to greet the rising sun. This daily alignment was a practical spiritual act designed to welcome the first light of dawn into the home, filling it with positive energy and blessings for the day ahead, a constant reminder of renewal and harmony with the sun's cycle. From the colossal solstitial axes of Stonehenge on the Salisbury Plain to the intimate sunrise-oriented doorways of Navajo family homes, we see the same human impulse manifesting on every conceivable scale. It is the universal urge to find a pattern, to establish a rhythm, to build a wall of meaning against the terrifying vastness and unpredictability of the cosmos. Whether it was an emperor claiming his mandate from the pole star or a family aligning their home to the dawn, the goal was the same: to tame the sky's terror by embedding its order into the very structures of daily life. This architectural dialogue with the heavens provided the ultimate comfort, the belief that they had a designated, secure, and meaningful place within the grand and often frightening scheme of the universe. And the stories they told to explain that universe, the rich mythological foundations for these fears and practices, are where we must turn our attention next. To understand the profound dread that fueled the alignment of entire cities, we must first listen to the stories our ancestors told themselves about the very nature of the cosmos. These were not mere bedtime tales. They were the foundational operating manuals for reality itself, sacred narratives that explained why the sky was both beautiful and terrifying, and why humanity had a sacred duty to maintain its order. The most powerful of these stories were the creation myths, and few are more vivid or influential than the Babylonian epic, the Enuma Elish. This grand poem describes a time before time, when there was only the swirling, formless, and monstrous saltwater goddess Tiamat, the embodiment of primal chaos. From her conflict with the younger generation of gods emerges the hero Marduk, who agrees to battle her on the condition that he be made the supreme ruler. In a cataclysmic struggle, Marduk defeats Tiamat, but his next act is what truly shaped the ancient worldview. He does not simply destroy her, he uses her slaughtered body as the raw material to construct the ordered universe. He splits her in two, pinioning one half to create the dome of the heavens and leaving the other to form the earth. Her eyes become the sources of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, her tail becomes the Milky Way. This is the ultimate act of cosmic ordering, the violent imposition of structure onto chaos. But the haunting subtext, the true source of the fear, is that Tiamat's chaotic essence is not gone. It is merely contained, held at bay by the divine order Marduk established. Every unexpected storm, every eclipse, every comet was seen as a momentary resurgence of Tiamat's power, a flicker of the old chaos threatening to break its bonds and reduce the world to formless nothingness once more. This myth provided the ultimate rationale for those precise urban alignments. Building a city to celestial specifications was an act of continuous reenactment of Marduk's victory. It was a way for humanity to pick up a hammer and help nail the sky in place, reinforcing the cosmic order against the ever-present threat of a return to the void. This pattern of a celestial battle establishing a fragile order is a global phenomenon. In Greek mythology, Hesiod's Theogony recounts a strikingly similar struggle. The universe begins with chaos, a yawning void from which emerge the first gods, including the Titans. The Titan Cronus overthrew his father Uranus, only to be overthrown in turn by his own son, Zeus. The epic war between the Olympian gods led by Zeus and the older Titan gods was not just a family squabble. It was a cosmological revolution. Zeus's victory with his thunderbolt, a weapon forged from the sky itself, established a new, more just celestial order. But as Hesiod warns in his Works and Days, this order is conditional. Humans must live justly and piously, aligning their lives and actions with this divine will, or risk provoking Zeus's wrath and upsetting the balance. A sudden thunderstorm wasn't just weather. It could be a direct sign of Zeus's displeasure, a warning that human misbehavior was weakening the cosmic order won at such great cost. These stories provided a narrative framework that made sense of a terrifyingly unpredictable world. A solar eclipse could be explained as a dragon trying to devour the sun, a concept found in both Chinese and Norse myths. The unpredictable movement of planets became the wandering of gods with complex and often tempestuous emotions. The sky was no longer a random collection of lights. It was a storybook, a dramatic stage where the ongoing struggle between order and chaos played out in real time. To misalign a temple was not just an architectural error. It was to side with the Titans, with Tiamat, with the forces of primeval chaos against the hard-won order of the gods. This deep mythological programming was then physically etched into the landscape through deliberate urban planning. Cities were not just built near resources, they were founded on sites of mythical significance and oriented to honor the legendary figures from these stories. In Greece, the most famous oracle at Delphi was believed to be the literal center of the world, the omphalos or navel, determined by Zeus releasing two eagles from opposite ends of the earth and having them meet at that spot. The entire sacred precinct, including the Temple of Apollo, was oriented to respect this mythological geography, making the site itself a permanent monument to that founding myth. Similarly, the Great Pyramids of Giza in Egypt present one of the most compelling archaeological cases for myth-driven alignment. The three main pyramids are arranged in a pattern that meticulously mirrors the three stars of Orion's belt. In Egyptian mythology, Orion was associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife, resurrection, and regenerative power. By mirroring this constellation on the ground, the pharaohs were not just building tombs, they were creating a massive machine for resurrection, a celestial staircase designed to project the soul of the deceased king directly into the eternal and cyclical dance of the stars, ensuring his rebirth alongside Osiris. The mythology provided the why, and the precise astronomical alignment provided the how. These foundational stories did more than just justify ritual practices. They amplified and codified the very existential fears that made those practices feel so urgently necessary. The myth of Tiamat gave a name and a face to the formless dread of chaos. The story of the Titanomachy made the stability of the world feel conditional, dependent on human piety. By giving a narrative to the terror, they also provided a prescribed solution adherence to a divine blueprint. This created a self-reinforcing cycle. The fear generated the myths demanded aligned architecture, and the presence of that architecture daily reaffirmed the power of the myths and the legitimacy of the fear. This intricate feedback loop between story, stone, and star became the bedrock of early civilization, a psychological and spiritual framework that would, over millennia, begin to shift and evolve as societies themselves grew more complex and their understanding of the world deepened. Now let's journey back to a pivotal turning point in human history, a transition so profound it reshaped our very relationship with the cosmos. Picture a small nomadic band, perhaps 12,000 years ago, settling for the night on a vast plain. Their survival depends on reading the land, the seasons, and the stars above. They notice that the Pleiades cluster disappears in the west just as the spring rains begin, signaling the time to follow the migrating herds. Their astronomy is intimate, practical, and woven into the very rhythm of their movement. The sky is a guide, a map painted in light, but then something revolutionary happens. These groups begin to settle down. They become farmers tied to a specific piece of land. Suddenly, the stakes of reading the sky are immeasurably higher. A mistake in predicting the seasons doesn't just mean a difficult journey. It could mean a failed harvest, starvation, and the collapse of their entire fledgling community. This is the crucible in which our deepest celestial fears were forged. This new, settled anxiety is physically manifested in the world's oldest known temple complex, Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, built by hunter-gatherers on the cusp of agriculture around 9600 BC. This was not a village, it was a regional ritual center, a stunningly early cathedral in stone. Its massive T-shaped pillars are arranged in circles, and archaeological analysis suggests they were deliberately aligned to track celestial events, likely including the solstices and the movements of Sirius and other bright stars. Why would nomadic people just beginning to experiment with farming invest such colossal effort in building a stone observatory? The answer lies in that terrifying new vulnerability. As they became dependent on the cycles of planting and harvest, they needed to predict the seasons with absolute reliability, but they also needed something more: protection. The sky was no longer just a guide, it had become a potential threat. A drought, a freak hailstorm, an unseasonal frost, these could all be interpreted as celestial anger. Göbekli Tepe's alignments were likely a desperate attempt to commune with the powers above, to plead for regularity, to ward off the chaos that could wipe them out. It was a monumental insurance policy, paid for in stone and sweat, against the terrifying unpredictability of their new way of life. This shift from practical stargazing to a cosmology infused with fear and propitiation accelerated dramatically with the rise of the first true cities in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley. As the historian of religion Mircea Eliade profoundly argued, urbanization didn't just change how people lived, it changed how they thought about the sacred. For nomadic peoples, the sacred was encountered in spontaneous, ephemeral moments, a striking rock formation, a powerful dream. But settled, urban societies sought to create and control the sacred permanently. The sporadic rituals of the village shaman were no longer sufficient for a city of thousands. Celestial fears had to be managed on an industrial scale. This led to the professionalization of sky watching. The part-time stargazer was replaced by a full-time, state-employed class of priest astronomers. Their observations became systematic, their records meticulous. In Babylon, this culminated in the astronomical diaries, thousands of clay tablets logging celestial events, weather, commodity prices, and historical occurrences for over 6 centuries. They were searching for correlations, building a massive database of cause and effect in the hope of predicting divine will. The sky was now a text to be decoded by a specialized bureaucratic class, and its messages were directly tied to the health of the state itself. This bureaucratization of belief went hand in hand with a technological arms race in precision. The simple sighting sticks of the past gave way to more sophisticated instruments like the Egyptian merkit and the Babylonian water clock. But the greatest tools were the cities themselves. The evolution from the rough solstitial alignment of Göbekli Tepe's stones to the breathtaking precision of the Great Pyramid of Giza aligned to true north with a margin of error of just 1/15 of a degree is a story of increasing anxiety and control. A village shrine could be a simple altar. A city, however, needed a ziggurat that scraped the heavens, a pyramid that captured the rays of the sun, a temple whose doors opened precisely to the rising of a patron star on its feast day. The cost of error was now societal collapse, so the alignment had to be perfect. This drive for precision was fueled by another key aspect of urbanization: trade and cultural exchange. Ideas about the sky traveled along with spices, metals, and textiles. Mesopotamian lunar observations influenced Egyptian timekeeping. Concepts from the Indus Valley may have filtered west. This created a shared language of celestial fear and a friendly competition in cosmic engineering. A king in Sumer would hear of a magnificent sun temple in Egypt and feel compelled to build something even grander, more precisely aligned, to prove his own city was equally favored by the gods. The sky was no longer a local concern. It was a universal challenge, and urban alignment became the ultimate expression of a civilization's sophistication and its desperate quest for security in an expanding and increasingly interconnected world. At our very core, we are pattern-seeking creatures. Our brains are hardwired to find connections, to assign meaning, to create a coherent narrative from the constant stream of sensory information we receive. This incredible ability is what allowed us to develop language, science, and culture. But this same cognitive tool has a shadow side, a glitch in our mental wiring that psychologists call apophenia. The tendency to perceive meaningful patterns or connections in random or meaningless data. Now cast this innate predisposition back into the ancient world and lift your gaze to the sky, that greatest and most chaotic canvas of all. What did our ancestors see? They saw a vast, unpredictable, and often terrifying display of random events. A shooting star streaks silently across the Inkai blackness. A comet with a glowing tail appears for weeks and then vanishes. The moon, a constant companion, slowly and mysteriously begins to disappear during an eclipse. To a modern mind, these are astronomical phenomena. To a mind ruled by apophenia, these are not random events. They are deliberate, meaningful messages. That comet isn't just a ball of ice and rock. It is a clear and terrifying omen, a divine brushstroke on the celestial canvas meant specifically for us, a warning of a king's death or an impending invasion. This fundamental cognitive bias transformed the sky from a neutral space into a text written in a divine language, a language that humanity felt an urgent, desperate need to decipher. This deep-seated need to find meaning in the heavens is so universal that the famous psychologist Carl Jung believed it was etched into the very bedrock of the human psyche. He proposed the theory of the collective unconscious, a reservoir of shared psychic structures and inherited experiences common to all humanity. Within this reservoir, he argued, reside powerful archetypes, universal, symbolic patterns that shape how we experience the world. And the sky is incredibly rich with these primal symbols. Jung spoke of the Sky Father archetype, a powerful, often stern, patriarchal god figure associated with the heavens, like Zeus, Jupiter, or the Abrahamic god, a supreme being who watches from above, judges, and delivers blessings or punishments. Conversely, there is the archetype of the chaos monster, the primordial beast of disorder that threatens to devour the cosmos, like Tiamat, the Midgard serpent, or the dragon that swallows the sun during an eclipse. These aren't just stories that different cultures invented independently. Jung would argue they are psychic eruptions, innate ways for humanity to process the awe and the dread inspired by the vast, uncontrollable sky. The Sky Father represents the longing for order and moral structure in the cosmos, while the chaos monster gives form to the terrifying fear that this order is fragile and could collapse at any moment. This explains why cultures with no possible contact with each other, from the Mayans to the Mesopotamians to the Norse, developed such strikingly similar myths about powerful sky gods and world-threatening chaos beasts. They were all looking up, feeling the same deep, archetypal stirrings of reverence and terror, and giving those feelings a name and a story. Beyond these grand archetypes, the sky was also a relentless source of very practical, existential anxiety. Before modern meteorology, the weather was the ultimate uncertainty. Would the rains come in time to save the crops? Would a drought wither them to dust? Would a sudden storm destroy a village or sink a trading ship? The changing of the seasons, while cyclical, was not perfectly reliable. An early frost or a late spring could mean the difference between life and death for an entire community. And then there were the true disasters, volcanic eruptions that filled the sky with ash, earthquakes that seemed to come from nowhere, tsunamis that rose from the sea. With no scientific understanding of plate tectonics or atmospheric science, where else could the blame for such cataclysmic events possibly lie but with the powers above? The sky became the logical, terrifyingly capricious author of all fortune and misfortune. This constant state of vulnerability, of being at the mercy of forces infinitely larger than oneself, created a profound and pervasive need for control. But how do you control the weather? How do you command the seasons? You can't, but you can try to control your relationship with the entities you believe are in charge. This is where celestial alignment and ritual become the ultimate coping mechanisms. By building a city that perfectly mirrors the predictable, orderly motions of the stars and planets, ancient peoples were psychologically imposing a framework of predictability onto the unpredictable. They were creating a pocket of certainty in a world of chaos. The ritual of aligning a temple to the solstice sunrise was a way of saying, "We understand your rules. We see the pattern, we are participating in the order." It was a powerful way to reduce anxiety, to foster a sense of agency, and to build the resilience needed to face an uncertain world. In the end, the stones they so carefully placed were more than just an offering to the gods. They were a profound psychological anchor, a way to steady the human spirit against the terrifying and beautiful vastness of the unknown. Now consider the immense pressure resting on the shoulders of a Maya day keeper, a priest astronomer tasked with tracking the complex gears of their celestial clock. His world depended on the accurate turning of the long count calendar, a vast cyclical system measuring time in units from days to millennia. A miscalculation wasn't just a scheduling error, it was a potential death sentence for his entire civilization. The Maya believed that at the end of a major calendar cycle, the universe was vulnerable to a total cosmic reset, a collapse of the world and a return to primordial chaos. This wasn't an abstract concept, it was a terrifying deadline. To prevent this apocalypse, to prove to the gods that they were worthy of continued existence, they had to demonstrate their perfect understanding of cosmic time. This is why cities like Tikal and Kapon were designed as massive stone calendars. Their towering pyramids and palaces were precisely aligned to act as astronomical markers. Specific buildings were positioned so that on the days of the solar zenith, when the sun passes directly overhead and casts no shadow, a precise beam of light would illuminate a sacred chamber or a carved stela. This dramatic event was a critical checkpoint, a way to physically verify that their calendar calculations were in perfect sync with the actual movement of the heavens. It was a ritual of reassurance, a way to say to the gods, "We are watching, we are counting, we are maintaining the order you established." The entire urban landscape became a mechanism for warding off temporal chaos, transforming the abstract fear of a calendar's end into a tangible, architectural practice that governed daily life. This Maya obsession with celestial timekeeping was a dramatic expression of a universal ancient need. Across the globe, the development of the calendar was humanity's single most important tool for imposing order on a seemingly chaotic natural world. These were not simple date keepers, they were sacred instruments for synchronizing every human activity: planting, harvesting, marrying, going to war, worshipping, with the perceived rhythms of the divine. Getting the timing wrong was not an option. The Roman writer Cotto the Elder, in his Manual on Farming, explicitly tied agricultural success to the stars. He advised farmers to begin the vintage at the rising of the dog star, warning that a failure to do so could ruin the entire harvest. This belief that human prosperity was directly linked to celestial events made the calendar a matter of literal life and death. A festival held on the wrong day could be seen as a profound insult to a god, just as planting a week too early or too late could lead to crop failure and famine. The calendar was the ultimate interface between the human and the divine, and its accuracy was the foundation of all stability, both spiritual and practical. To achieve this vital accuracy, cultures developed different systems based on their unique observations and needs, each demanding incredible astronomical precision. Lunar calendars, based on the 29.5-day cycle of the moon's phases, were among the oldest and simplest. Islamic and many ancient Semitic cultures used them, but their short 12-month year of about 354 days quickly fell out of sync with the solar year and the seasons, requiring constant intercalation, the adding of extra days or months by priestly authorities. Solar calendars, like the one eventually adopted by the Romans and which we use today, followed the 365.25-day journey of the Earth around the Sun. This was far better for tracking the seasons for agriculture, but it required extremely precise observations of the Sun's position on the horizon at the solstices and equinoxes to correct for that extra quarter day each year. The most complex solution was the lunisolar calendar, which blended both systems used by the Babylonians, Hebrews, and Chinese. It kept lunar months but added an extra month every few years to stay aligned with the solar year and the seasons. This was a breathtakingly difficult feat of long-term astronomical record-keeping and calculation, and it could only be accomplished by a dedicated, state-sponsored class of scholars who spent their lives watching the sky. The creation and maintenance of all these calendars demanded more than just handheld instruments. They required the city itself to become an observatory. This is where celestial alignment transitioned from a spiritual ideal to an absolute practical necessity. In Egypt, the entire agricultural cycle, and thus the survival of the civilization, revolved around the annual, life-giving flooding of the Nile. The key to predicting this event was the heliacal rising of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. After a period of invisibility, Sirius would reappear just before dawn in the eastern sky. This single, brilliant event signaled that the floodwaters were coming. The Egyptian civil calendar was meticulously structured around this phenomenon. Their year began with this reappearance, and their 12-month calendar was designed to keep this celestial event locked in its proper place. To ensure they never missed it, temples and monuments were aligned to the rising point of Sirius on the horizon. A priest standing in the correct spot in a temple courtyard on that crucial morning would see the star emerge directly over a specific obelisk or through a gate, triggering the official start of the new year and the frantic preparations for the flood. Similarly, in China, the agricultural calendar was tied to the equinoxes. The ancient Chinese observed the sun's shifting path along the horizon, building observatories like the Zhou dynasty's altar of heaven to precisely determine the equinox dates, which dictated the timing for planting and harvesting key crops like millet and rice. The emperor himself would perform rituals at these precisely aligned altars to ensure the harmony of the seasons and the prosperity of his people. This urgent, non-negotiable need for accurate timekeeping is what made the precise celestial alignment of cities and monuments a practical, everyday necessity, reinforcing the ever-present fear of temporal disorder. A misaligned temple wasn't just theologically offensive, it was a broken clock. If the gateway that was supposed to frame the winter solstice sunrise was off by even a few degrees, the priest inside would miss the crucial moment. This could lead to an error in the calendar, which would throw off the entire ritual and agricultural cycle. A planting festival might be celebrated too late, the seeds sown in barren ground. The gods would be offered sacrifices on the wrong days, appearing to ignore their people's pleas. This temporal confusion was seen as the first step toward societal collapse, a descent back into the chaos that existed before the gods established time itself. The towering pyramids, the long ceremonial causeways, the precisely oriented gates, these were not vanity projects. They were the essential, immovable gears of a society's clock, the physical mechanism that kept them in step with the cosmos. This relentless drive to master time through stone and alignment would soon lead to the creation of the most breathtaking structures of all, monuments that functioned not just as markers of a single event, but as permanent, complex calendars that could track the passage of years, decades, and even centuries. Stand before the massive, grass-covered mound of Newgrange in Ireland on the morning of the winter solstice. For the rest of the year, its inner chamber is a place of profound darkness and silence, a tomb for the ancient dead. But on this one crucial day, as the sun crests the horizon, a miraculous event unfolds. A single, narrow beam of sunlight pierces through a specially designed roof box above the entrance, traveling down the long passageway to illuminate the central chamber in a dazzling golden light. This was not a happy accident of construction. It was a meticulously engineered phenomenon, a dramatic symbol of rebirth designed to counteract the deepest human fear, that the sun would continue to weaken, the darkness would win, and the world would be plunged into an eternal, lifeless winter. This was a cosmic clock built in stone, delivering an annual promise that the light would always return. This principle of embedding celestial knowledge into architecture was a global endeavor. Across the ocean, at Chichen Itza in Mexico, the Pyramid of El Castillo performs a different but equally stunning celestial trick. As the renowned archaeoastronomer Clive Ruggles has documented, during the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun casts a series of triangular shadows along the northern staircase of the pyramid. These interlocking shapes of light and shadow create the undulating body of a massive serpent, which appears to slither down from the sky to connect with the stone serpent head carved at the base. This was the manifestation of Teotihuacan, the feathered serpent god, a divine being associated with creation, agriculture, and the turning of the seasons. The pyramid itself became a colossal sundial and a calendar, its 4 sides with 91 steps each, adding up to 364 steps, with the platform at the top completing the 365 days of the solar year. The entire structure was a mathematical equation made visible, a way to track the passage of time through the play of light and shadow. These monuments served a powerful dual purpose, seamlessly weaving together the practical and the spiritual. On one hand, they were incredibly sophisticated tools for timekeeping. The precise alignment of Newgrange allowed a Neolithic farming community to know, with absolute certainty, the exact moment of the winter solstice. This was the pivotal turning point of the year, the signal to prepare for the eventual return of spring and the new planting season. Similarly, the serpent shadow at Chichen Itza marked the equinoxes, the moments of perfect balance between day and night, which were critical for agricultural planning and for scheduling the intricate cycle of religious ceremonies and markets. This was practical science encoded in landscape, but on a deeper, more profound level, these structures were instruments of ritual propitiation. They were built to appease the gods who were believed to control the very cycles of time. The dramatic illumination of Newgrange's tomb was likely seen as the sun god himself entering the house of the ancestors, perhaps to collect the souls of the dead and carry them into the new cycle of life, ensuring the continued fertility of the land and people. The descent of Teotihuacan was not a spectacle for tourists. It was a divine visitation, a moment when the god physically connected with his people, renewing his covenant with them and promising rain, good harvests, and protection. A misalignment in these structures would have been catastrophic. If the sun failed to light the chamber at Newgrange, or if the shadows on El Castillo failed to form the serpent, it would be interpreted as a catastrophic breakdown in the relationship with the divine. The gods were not listening, the cosmic order was broken, and terror would have gripped the community, fearing famine, drought, and societal collapse. The construction and perpetual maintenance of these cosmic clocks required an immense investment of labor and resources, which in turn fostered remarkable societal cohesion. Building Newgrange required a community to quarry thousands of tons of stone, transport massive curbstones from miles away, and organize a workforce with specialized skills in engineering, astronomy, and construction. This was not the project of a lone shaman. It was a civilization-wide endeavor, the very act of coming together to build something that would protect them all from celestial terror strengthened social bonds, created a shared identity, and centralized cultural knowledge. The maintenance of the alignments was just as crucial. Over centuries, settlements could shift and ground could settle. Keeping the sightlines clear and the structures intact required a sustained, generational commitment, a communal promise to keep the cosmic clock ticking. These projects turned abstract celestial fears into tangible, communal action, uniting people under a shared goal of survival and harmony with the powers that govern their universe. They stand as the most tangible and enduring expressions of humanity's ancient attempt to master time and soothe its deepest terrors, not through force but through careful observation, brilliant engineering, and a desperate collective plea to the heavens for order. Imagine the entire rhythm of life in ancient Egypt, a heartbeat dictated not by kings or calendars alone, but by the relentless, mysterious flow of the Nile River. Each year, without fail, the river would swell, overflow its banks, and deposit a layer of rich, black silt across the floodplain, transforming the desert into some of the most fertile land on Earth. This event was the engine of their civilization, the difference between abundance and starvation, but its timing was not perfectly predictable by the simple counting of days. The key to unlocking the Nile's secret was found not in the water but in the sky. Egyptian priests, the keenest observers of their age, noticed a profound correlation. The life-giving flood always arrived just after the heliacal rising of Sirius, the brightest star in the heavens. After a period of invisibility, Sirius would reappear just before dawn in the eastern sky, and soon after, the waters would begin to rise. This celestial signal was so vital that it became the anchor of their entire calendar and the spiritual justification for their urban design. Temples were meticulously aligned to the rising point of Sirius on the horizon. A priest standing in the inner sanctum on that crucial morning would witness the star's first light piercing the temple gateway, a divine confirmation that the flood was coming and that the god Osiris was fulfilling his promise of renewal and rebirth. This wasn't just astronomy, it was a profound act of environmental symbiosis. They were aligning their sacred architecture to the very pulse of the ecosystem that sustained them, believing that this harmony between earth, river, and sky was the only thing preventing the unthinkable. A year when the Nile failed to rise, bringing drought, famine, and the collapse of the cosmic order they called Mat. This intimate dialogue between landscape and celestial belief was a global phenomenon shaped by the unique pressures each culture faced. In the volatile climate of India, the Vedic peoples lived in the anxious grip of the monsoon. Their survival depended on the timely arrival of these torrential seasonal rains. A delayed monsoon meant parched earth and failed crops. An overly intense one could bring devastating floods. Their response was to turn their sacred architecture into a mechanism for celestial harmony. The precise geometric construction of their fire altars, as dictated in the Sulba Sutras, was believed to directly influence the weather. The altars were aligned not just to cardinal directions, but to the paths of the winds and the seasonal movements of the sun, serving as a ritual technology to invite the rains and ensure their benevolence. The Greek historian Herodotus, often called the father of history, traveled to Egypt and was astounded by this deep interconnection. He wrote that the Egyptian priests were the most learned of all men, and he specifically noted how they used the Nile's predictable-unpredictable cycle to refine their astronomical models, understanding that the river was a terrestrial reflection of celestial patterns. Their environmental reality was their greatest teacher, forcing them to look upward for answers to the most pressing questions of survival on the ground. Now travel across the world to the breathtaking peaks of the Andes Mountains. Here, the Inca civilization faced a completely different set of environmental challenges. Their world was one of extreme verticality, with deep valleys and soaring, snow-capped peaks. In this rugged landscape, the sky did not simply arc overhead. It was intimately woven into the physical fabric of the earth. The Inca saw these mountain peaks, which they called apus, not as inanimate rock, but as powerful, sacred deities towering, celestial beings that controlled the weather, provided water from their glaciers, and protected the people. This belief fundamentally shaped their approach to celestial alignment. Unlike the Egyptians orienting structures to a distant star on the flat horizon, the Inca integrated their astronomy directly into the mountainous terrain. The city of Cusco was laid out in the shape of a puma, but its sacred shrines, or huacas, were carefully positioned along sightlines that connected specific mountains to key celestial events. A temple might be built to frame the rising of the Pleiades over a particular sacred peak, or a corridor might be oriented so the winter solstice sun appeared to crown the summit of a revered Apu. Their urban planning was an act of reverence to the landscape itself, a way to physically tether their cities to the divine power they believed resided in the mountains and the sky above them. The environment wasn't a challenge to overcome. It was a sacred partner in a cosmic dialogue. Beyond these steady-state environmental pressures, sudden and catastrophic climate events could shatter a civilization's sense of security, intensifying celestial fears to a fever pitch and prompting even more rigid and desperate alignment practices. While the term Little Ice Age refers to a later period in medieval Europe, the ancient world was no stranger to abrupt climate shifts. A major volcanic eruption, like the colossal explosion of Thera around 1600 BC, could eject so much ash into the atmosphere that it would trigger a volcanic winter, dimming the sun for years, causing widespread crop failure and plunging temperatures. For the Minoan civilization on Crete, which was within sight of the eruption, the event was apocalyptic. How could they possibly interpret this through any lens other than their existing worldview? The sun, the ultimate symbol of divine order and power, was visibly weakened. The skies were strange and darkened. The most logical, terrifying conclusion was that they had somehow failed their gods. Perhaps a temple was askew or a key ritual had been neglected. The gods had unleashed their fury. In the aftermath of such a disaster, we can easily imagine a desperate turn toward extreme orthodoxy. Priestly power would have been consolidated, and the alignment of new temples and cities would have been pursued with even greater precision and fervor, seen as the only way to appease the angry deities and restore balance to a world that had literally been plunged into shadow. These climate shocks acted as a brutal feedback loop, reinforcing the perceived link between celestial order and terrestrial survival, and making the costly, labor-intensive practice of urban alignment seem not just wise, but absolutely essential for preventing the total unraveling of their world. Now consider the sheer scale of human effort required to turn these celestial blueprints into stone and earth. The ambition was written in the heavens, but the price was paid here on the ground, in the sweat of thousands and the wealth of entire kingdoms. This was not a part-time spiritual hobby. It was the ancient world's equivalent of a moonshot, a massive economic undertaking that consumed a staggering proportion of a society's resources and labor. To align a city to the cosmos was to make a breathtaking investment in cosmic insurance, an investment that required a degree of social organization and centralized control that was unprecedented in human history. The logistics behind a project like the Great Pyramid of Giza are almost incomprehensible. We're talking about quarrying, transporting, and precisely positioning over 2 million stone blocks, each weighing several tons. This wasn't accomplished by a disorganized mob. It was a highly coordinated, state-sponsored enterprise that required managers, engineers, cooks, scribes, and legions of skilled and unskilled laborers. These workers had to be housed, fed, and supplied with tools, all while being diverted from other economically vital tasks like farming, crafting, or trading. The same is true for the colossal ziggurats of Mesopotamia, like the great structure at Ur, which required the production and placement of millions of baked mud bricks. Expert estimates suggest that even a moderately sized ziggurat would have demanded the labor of hundreds of workers for several decades. This represents an enormous opportunity cost, all that human energy and time poured into a single, non-agricultural, non-military project. The only possible justification for such a drain on the economy was a belief that the stakes were existential. The cost of not building it, of risking divine displeasure and the ensuing famine, plague, or invasion, was seen as infinitely greater. Funding such monumental endeavors required a revolutionary new form of economics, centralized resource extraction. A nomadic tribe or a small village could never muster the surplus or the organization for such projects. But a city-state with a ruling elite could. Kings and priests financed these cosmic ventures through a combination of taxation, tribute from conquered peoples, and the direct control of agricultural surplus and craft production. A farmer might be required to contribute a portion of his harvest to feed the workers building the temple. An artisan might be conscripted to work for a season carving hieroglyphs or shaping stones instead of making goods for the market. This system fundamentally reinforced and deepened social hierarchies. The ruling class, who claimed a unique connection to the celestial powers, justified their privileged position as necessary to manage this divine-human relationship. They controlled the knowledge, they organized the labor, and they reaped the political benefits of being seen as the protectors of the people. The grand project became a powerful tool for propaganda, solidifying their power and creating a visible, awe-inspiring symbol of their divine mandate that literally towered over the homes of the common people. This economic framework also created a powerful feedback loop that blamed economic hardship on spiritual failure. When a drought led to famine or a plague swept through the city, the ruling elite had a ready-made explanation: the gods were angry. Cuneiform tablets from Babylon explicitly attribute agricultural disasters to the neglect of temples or the improper performance of rituals. The solution, therefore, was never just to build better granaries or improve irrigation, though they did those things too. Primary solution was to double down on the cosmic investment. The temple needed to be repaired, realigned, or made even grander. A new, more elaborate ritual might be instituted. This directed public frustration away from the rulers and toward a collective spiritual failing, and it channeled what little remaining resources the struggling society had back into the very system controlled by the elite. It was a self-perpetuating cycle of fear and expenditure, where the economic burden of celestial alignment was constantly justified by the economic catastrophes it was meant to prevent. The stones of their sacred cities were heavy, but the economic and social weight of maintaining cosmic order was a pressure that shaped the very foundations of early civilization, a testament to the incredible lengths humanity will go to in order to feel secure beneath a vast and unpredictable sky. But this grand, ancient conversation between earth and sky could not last forever. A profound shift was brewing, one that would fundamentally reshape humanity's relationship with the heavens and, in turn, the very layouts of our cities. The rise of powerful monotheistic faiths like Christianity and Islam introduced a radically new spiritual paradigm. Instead of a pantheon of planetary gods and celestial spirits whose wills had to be constantly decoded and appeased through precise alignment, these religions presented a single, omnipotent, and transcendent deity. This god was not physically embedded within the sun, moon, or stars. He existed beyond and above them, having created the cosmos as a separate entity. The sky was no longer a living, breathing, divine realm. It was a creation, a clockwork universe set in motion by a distant clockmaker. This theological revolution dramatically reduced the perceived necessity for the kind of meticulous celestial alignment that had obsessed earlier civilizations. Why orient a cathedral to the solstice sunrise when God's presence was everywhere and his attention was gained through prayer and faith, not through the geometric correctness of a building's placement? The focus of sacred architecture turned inward, toward the spiritual journey of the individual soul within the space, rather than outward toward a harmonious alignment with capricious cosmic forces. This spiritual shift was powerfully articulated by early Christian thinkers. Saint Augustine, in his monumental 4th century work The City of God, launched a direct and withering attack on the old pagan astral beliefs. He mocked the idea that the stars could determine human fate or that their movements required specific earthly rituals. For Augustine, true alignment was not a matter of cardinal directions or solstitial axes. It was a matter of the heart's orientation toward God. He argued that placing one's faith in celestial omens was a form of idolatry, a distraction from the true spiritual path to salvation. This intellectual and theological framework provided the justification for a new kind of urban planning in medieval Europe. Cities like Chartres in France were still meticulously planned, but their orientation was now overwhelmingly religious, not astronomical. The cathedral, the symbolic center of the town, was almost always aligned on an east-west axis, with the altar at the eastern end facing toward Jerusalem, the site of Christ's resurrection. This was a pilgrimage orientation, a spiritual facing toward a holy place, not an astronomical alignment to a star or a solstice sun. The chaotic, organic street patterns of medieval towns grew around these ecclesiastical centers, reflecting a social order centered on the church and the market, not on the movements of the planets. At the same time, though far more slowly, a scientific revolution was beginning to dawn. As early as the 3rd century BCE, the Greek astronomer Aristarchus of Samos had proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system, suggesting that the Earth revolved around the Sun. While his ideas were largely rejected in his own time, they planted a seed. Centuries later, during the Enlightenment, thinkers like Nicolaus Copernicus, Johannes Kepler, and Isaac Newton would pick up that thread and, through meticulous observation and mathematics, begin to unravel the mechanical workings of the universe. The sky was gradually being demystified. A comet was no longer a terrifying omen. It was a predictable celestial object following orbital laws. An eclipse was not a dragon eating the sun. It was a breathtaking but explainable alignment of astronomical bodies. The universe began to appear as a vast, predictable, and impersonal machine operating under consistent natural laws. This new understanding steadily eroded the ancient, primal fear that had driven urban alignment for millennia. If the cosmos was a clock, then there was no need to build cities to appease it. The task was simply to understand its mechanics. This is not to say the old ideas vanished overnight. The Renaissance, with its passionate rediscovery of classical knowledge, saw a fascinating revival of interest in cosmic harmony. Thinkers and architects like Leon Battista Alberti studied Vitruvius and advocated for city designs based on ideal human proportions and geometric principles that echoed the perceived order of the universe. Pope Sixtus V's ambitious plan for Rome in the late 16th century used obelisks as visual markers to create long, straight avenues linking the city's major basilicas, imposing a new, rational order on the medieval maze, an order that still retained a hint of celestial symbolism. Yet even these projects were more about asserting humanist or papal power and creating aesthetic beauty than they were about averting divine chaos. The terror had largely drained away, leaving behind a more metaphorical appreciation for cosmic order. The final blow to the ancient practice came with the Industrial Revolution. Urban planning as Chinese letter secularized, now driven by the relentless engines of industry, commerce, and efficiency. Primary concerns were no longer solstices or omens, but railway lines, factory placement, sanitation, and the rapid housing of a massive new workforce. Cities like London and Manchester exploded in size, their grids and crescents laid out by surveyors and engineers answerable to capitalist logic, not priestly astronomies. The sky above these smog-filled industrial centers was often obscured, becoming less a source of wonder and more an obscured backdrop to human endeavor. The ancient, urgent dialogue between earth and sky, which had given rise to the world's first cities and its most awe-inspiring monuments, had finally fallen silent. its echoes fading into myth, metaphor, and the forgotten alignments of stones that still whisper to us of a time when humanity looked up in both terror and awe. Though we may no longer look at a solar eclipse and see a dragon swallowing the sun, or interpret a comet as an omen of a king's death, the deep-seated human urge to find order in the cosmos is still quietly built into the world around us. Take a walk through the heart of Washington, D.C., and you are traversing a landscape steeped in this ancient language. The city's powerful street grid, laid out by Pierre L'Enfant in the late 18th century, is meticulously aligned to the cardinal directions north, south, east, and west. This wasn't just for neatness, it was a conscious decision to echo the classical ideals of order and balance found in Rome and the great European capitals, which themselves drew inspiration from those first celestial cities. The placement of the Capitol building, the White House, and the monumental core all speak to a desire to project stability, power, and a sense of being right with the world, a modern manifestation of the same principle that guided the builders of Teotihuacan or ancient Beijing. We may call it urban design, but its roots are in cosmic harmony. This legacy extends far beyond government architecture. The ancient Chinese practice of feng shui, which translates to wind and water, is a 3,000-year-old system for arranging the human-built environment in harmony with the natural flow of energy, or Kai. While often viewed in the West as a decorative philosophy, it is a serious geometric discipline for aligning buildings, rooms, and furniture with environmental forces and celestial directions. A modern office building in Hong Kong might be designed with a dragon gate entrance facing a specific direction to attract prosperity, or a high-rise might have a deliberately staggered facade to allow for the beneficial flow of energy, much like an ancient temple was oriented to channel divine favor. This isn't merely superstition. It's a sophisticated understanding of environmental psychology and spatial organization that predates modern science, and its enduring popularity reveals a persistent human desire to feel that our spaces are not just functional, but auspicious and aligned with a larger, invisible order. Even our most cutting-edge sustainable architecture often unknowingly embraces these ancient principles. The growing field of biophilic design seeks to reconnect human habitation with the natural world, and a key strategy is solar alignment. Modern green buildings are frequently positioned to maximize passive solar gain, with large south-facing windows in the northern hemisphere to capture the sun's low winter light for natural heating, while employing clever shading to block the high, harsh summer sun. This is done for purely practical reasons of energy efficiency and occupant comfort, yet it effectively replicates the same careful solar observation that guided the architects of Egyptian temples or Pueblo cliff dwellings. We are still dancing with the sun, only now we measure its benefits in kilowatts saved and carbon footprints reduced, rather than in the favor of the god Ra. And what of the ancient monuments themselves? They have undergone a profound transformation in our modern consciousness. A site like Stonehenge is no longer an active temple where priests dread a misalignment that could bring chaos. It is a powerful symbol of cultural heritage, a place of wonder, and a nexus for tourism and even spiritual pilgrimage. People gather by the thousands to witness the solstice sunrise, not out of fear, but out of a longing for connection to the past, to the cycles of nature, and to a sense of mystery that our hyper-rational world often lacks. These places have become the sacred parks of our secular age, reminding us of a time when the boundary between the earthly and the celestial felt thin and charged with meaning. As noted urban thinker Kevin Lynch argued in his seminal work The Image of the City, well-oriented and legible cities, those with clear pathways, distinct districts, and a coherent sense of place fundamentally reduce stress and improve the well-being of their inhabitants. This is the practical, psychological legacy of ancient wisdom. A well-aligned environment, whether oriented to the stars or simply to human intuition, makes us feel safe, grounded, and in control. Yet our relationship with the cosmos is far from settled. The old fears of divine wrath have simply been replaced by new, science-based cosmic anxieties. Where a Babylonian once feared the anger of Ishtar, we now track the trajectories of near-Earth objects with powerful telescopes, calculating the statistically small but existentially terrifying possibility of a catastrophic asteroid impact. Our modern priests are the astrophysicists at NASA and the SETI Institute, who scan the skies not for omens but for data on threats and for signs of intelligence elsewhere. Space exploration itself is the ultimate expression of this evolved relationship, a proactive quest to understand our place in the universe and to ensure the long-term survival of our species by becoming a multi-planetary civilization. We are still looking up with a mix of awe and trepidation, but our response is no longer to build a ziggurat, it is to build a rocket. This continuous, evolving dialogue with the heavens shows that our fundamental drive has not changed. We still seek to understand the cosmos and secure our place within it. Only the tools and the terminology have transformed. Now imagine yourself as a modern archaeoastronomer standing in the dry, windswept expanse of Choco Canyon in New Mexico. The sun beats down on the ruins of a great house, but in your hands you don't hold an ancient tool. You hold a tablet connected to a high-precision laser scanner, meticulously mapping every angle and orientation of a crumbling wall. This isn't just archaeology, it's a form of time travel. You are using 21st century technology to peer into the mind of an ancestral Puebloan architect who lived 1,000 years ago. Your goal is to test a hypothesis that this structure and others like it in the canyon were deliberately aligned not just to the sun, but to the far more complex and subtle cycles of the moon. This is the fascinating, interdisciplinary world of archaeoastronomy, a field that merges the hard data of astronomy with the cultural context of anthropology and the physical evidence of archaeology to finally decode the celestial language of our ancestors. The methods these modern sky detectives use are a world away from the simple measuring tapes and compasses of the past. Today, they employ laser theodolites and GPS with centimeter-level accuracy to measure the azimuths, the horizontal angles of ancient walls, doorways, and windows. They use sophisticated software like Stellarium or SkyMap Pro that can roll back the celestial clock, recreating the exact night sky as it would have appeared over a specific location on any given date for the last 10,000 years. This allows them to simulate, for example, the rising point of the moon at its most extreme northern and southern points on the horizon, events known as the major and minor lunar standstills, which occur on an 18.6-year cycle. As scholar Giulio Magli has demonstrated through his work, these digital reconstructions are revolutionary. They allow us to move beyond speculation and prove intentionality. When a computer model shows that a solitary window in a thick wall at Choco Canyon frames only the moon at its minor standstill, and does so with pinpoint accuracy, it's no longer a coincidence. It is confirmed as a deliberate, sophisticated astronomical sightline, a window onto the cosmos built by people with a deep and generational understanding of the sky's most complex dances. These technological revelations are profoundly changing our perception of ancient knowledge. For generations, the conventional view often dismissed the alignments of structures like Stonehenge or the pyramids as either accidental or the product of rudimentary sun worship. Archaeoastronomy is systematically dismantling these assumptions, revealing a level of precision and intellectual ambition that rivals our own. A key discovery that highlights this sophistication is the Maya Dresden Codex. This ancient book, a fragile bark paper manuscript, is not a mythic text but a breathtakingly accurate astronomical almanac. It contains detailed tables that track the cycles of Venus with remarkable precision, predicting its appearances as the morning and evening star over a timeline spanning centuries. This wasn't just academic knowledge, it was directly applied to urban planning and warfare. Maya rulers would schedule military campaigns to coincide with specific celestial events, believing the planet Venus, associated with the god Kukulkan, would grant them favor. Their cities were laid out to reflect this cosmic order, with temples oriented to the planet's extreme rising and setting points. The Codex is a powerful testament to the fact that these were not primitive people fearing a random sky. They were scientist priests who observed, recorded, predicted, and integrated complex celestial mechanics into the very fabric of their society. Ultimately, the work of Archaeoastronomy does more than just satisfy our historical curiosity. It performs a crucial act of intellectual justice. For too long, the monumental achievements of non-Western cultures were downplayed or attributed to lost civilizations or even extraterrestrials theories that often carry a subtle, damaging bias that ancient peoples were incapable of such feats on their own. By rigorously proving the intentionality and precision behind these alignments, Archaeoastronomy restores the dignity and brilliance of these cultures. It shows us that the ancestral pueblones of Choco Canyon were not just surviving in a harsh landscape. They were creating a sophisticated ceremonial complex aligned with the cosmos. It reveals the Maya as master astronomers and mathematicians. This field honors their intellectual heritage, recognizing that their drive to understand the universe was as valid and as profound as our own. It's a humbling reminder that the quest for knowledge is a human constant, and that by studying how they mapped the heavens onto their Earth, we might just learn something profound about our own place in the cosmos. There is a profound and humbling lesson for us today in the way our ancestors channeled their celestial terror into collective action. Their response to the overwhelming fear of cosmic chaos was not to retreat into isolated panic, but to come together and build. The very act of constructing a solar observatory or aligning a city grid was a monumental act of communal resilience. It required thousands of people, quarrymen, haulers, engineers, surveyors, and priests to coordinate their labor under a shared, unifying purpose to protect their community from the perceived wrath of the heavens. This collaborative effort did more than just raise stones. It forged powerful social bonds, created a shared cultural identity, and demonstrated that by uniting against a common existential threat, humanity could achieve the seemingly impossible. The Great Pyramid of Giza or the massive stones of Stonehenge are not just feats of engineering. They are testaments to the incredible power of human cooperation born from a shared anxiety. That collective spirit, the transformation of fear into a unifying project, is perhaps their greatest legacy to us. This urgent need to understand and appease the sky also became the mother of invention, driving astonishing advances in science and technology. The precise alignment of monuments was not a matter of guesswork. It demanded a sophisticated understanding of mathematics and geometry. The Egyptian harpodonapti, or rope stretchers, used knotted cords to create perfect right angles, applying the principles of the Pythagorean theorem millennia before Pythagoras was born. Tracking the complex cycles of the moon and planets led to the development of accurate calendars, which in turn required advanced timekeeping devices like water clocks. The need to predict an eclipse to avert panic spurred meticulous, generations-long record-keeping and the development of early computational methods. Their terror of the sky forced them to look closer, to measure more precisely, and to think more critically. In their desperate attempt to impose order on the cosmos, they inadvertently laid the foundational stones for modern astronomy, engineering, and mathematics. Their greatest innovations were born not from comfort, but from a necessity to survive in a world they believed was fraught with divine peril. We now face our own modern-day celestial threats, not in the form of angry gods, but in the slow, steady, and scientifically verified crisis of a changing climate. Like the ancient Babylonians who saw a comet and feared for their kingdom, we see rising sea levels, intensifying storms, and devastating wildfires. The parallel is striking. Our challenge, too, is existential, global, and requires a coordinated response on a scale never before attempted. The ancient model offers a powerful blueprint that shared fear, when properly harnessed, can be the very catalyst for global cooperation and groundbreaking innovation. Just as the alignment of cities required a centralized vision and a collective buy-in from all levels of society, addressing climate change demands that we move beyond individual action and national interests to forge a genuine, worldwide commitment. The ancients teach us that the answer to a planetary threat is not isolation but integration, not despair but determined collaborative effort. At the heart of their practice was a principle we have dangerously neglected: the necessity of living in harmony with nature, not seeking to dominate it. Ancient urban planning was an exercise in biomimicry. They looked to the cycles of the sun, the moon, and the stars and built their world to reflect those cycles. They understood that they were part of a larger, delicate system and that their survival depended on respecting its rhythms. This wisdom echoes down through the ages. The Roman philosopher Seneca, in his Natural Questions, warned starkly against ignoring the signs of the natural world, writing, "If a great city is built on a fault, do we praise the inhabitants for their courage? No, we call them foolish for ignoring the clear dangers." His words, aimed at those who built in geologically unstable areas, resonate with a chilling prescience today. We have built our global civilization on the fault lines of fossil fuel dependency and environmental exploitation, and now the ground is shaking. The ancient impulse to align with natural forces is now more relevant than ever, finding its modern expression in the sustainable city movement, which seeks to create urban environments that work with local ecosystems, harness renewable energy, and promote balance rather than conquest. Ultimately, studying these ancient responses grants us a crucial insight into the nature of human adaptability. For millennia, our species has looked into the abyss of the unknown and responded not just with fear, but with creativity, cooperation, and an unyielding drive to understand. They teach us that resilience is not the absence of fear, but the ability to transform that fear into a force for building, learning, and unifying. Their stones remind us that we are at our best when we face immense challenges together, with a respect for the powerful forces that govern our world. This long conversation with the past shows us that the capacity to adapt and overcome is woven into the very fabric of our history, a timeless resource we can draw upon as we navigate the uncertain skies of our own future. Imagine shifting the very foundation of how we think about our homes and cities, not as separate from the natural world, but as an integrated part of its grand celestial dance. This isn't about recreating stone circles in your backyard, but about embracing a philosophy, a way of seeing our place within a larger, rhythmic cosmos, just as our ancestors did. The principles that guided the builders of the Great Pyramid or the architects of Teotihuacan were about harmony and efficiency, concepts that are more relevant today than ever. We can start with something as simple as the placement of a window. By designing a new home or even repositioning a desk to face the southern sky in the northern hemisphere, we harness the sun's daily journey for passive solar heating and abundant natural light. This single act, a direct echo of ancient solar alignment, slashes energy consumption, reduces our carbon footprint, and bathes our living spaces in a quality of light that artificial bulbs can never replicate, profoundly boosting our mood and well-being. A community garden planned along these same lines, with rows oriented to capture the maximum sunlight throughout the growing season, becomes more than a source of food. It becomes a living calendar, connecting us to the agricultural cycles that once dictated the rhythm of all human life. This conscious reconnection is at the heart of the biophilic design movement, which argues that our innate biological connection to nature is essential for our mental and physical health. It's the reason why a room with a view of the sky feels more expansive, and why office workers with access to natural light report higher productivity and lower stress. Modern advocates like architect William McDonough, a pioneer of the cradle-to-cradle design philosophy, don't use the language of gods and omens, but their goal is strikingly similar to that of an ancient priest astronomer: to create systems that are not just efficient, but are inherently generous, positive, and in sync with the natural world. McDonough's work encourages us to see buildings not as isolated objects, but as organisms within an ecosystem, designed to harvest sunlight, manage water, and improve air quality. This is a modern, scientific application of that ancient desire to build in concert with cosmic and earthly patterns, creating environments that don't just shelter us, but actively nurture us. You don't need to be an architect or a builder to participate in this renewed relationship with the sky. The tools are literally at our fingertips. Smartphone apps can transform a nightly walk into a guided tour of the constellations, identifying planets and narrating the myths behind the stars. This turns abstract knowledge into personal experience, rebuilding that lost literacy of the night sky. On a more practical level, free sun path calculators available online can show you exactly how the sun will track across your property at any time of year, giving you the data you need to plant a deciduous tree that provides cooling shade in summer but allows warming light through in winter after its leaves have fallen. And participating in a local solstice or equinox celebration, whether at a historic site like Stonehenge or a community gathering in a city park, fulfills a deep human need for ritual and shared wonder. These events are a powerful antidote to the modern feeling of disconnection, placing us within a timeless community of humans who have always paused to mark these celestial turning points. Beyond the purely practical, this engagement with ancient celestial wisdom offers a profound enrichment of our cultural and creative lives. When we understand the genuine, bone-deep fear that drove the Maya to track Venus with such precision, the ruins of their cities cease to be mere rubble and become a testament to human anxiety and ingenuity. This deeper appreciation transforms a vacation to Chichen Itza from a simple photo opportunity into a meaningful pilgrimage. For artists and writers, these ancient themes provide a boundless source of inspiration. The struggle between cosmic order and chaos, the metaphor of aligning one's life to a higher purpose, the awe inspired by a meteor shower, these are timeless narratives that resonate just as powerfully today when expressed through film, literature, or music. By integrating these perspectives, we do more than just save on our electricity bills. We honor the intellectual and spiritual journey of our ancestors, weaving their hard-won insights into the fabric of our modern existence. This creates a more balanced future, one that respects the past without being bound by its fears, allowing us to build a world that is both technologically advanced and soulfully connected to the universe around us. Even with all our advanced technology and centuries of research, the ancient world still holds onto its most profound secrets with a stubborn grip. Consider the sprawling megalithic alignments at Karnak in France, where thousands of standing stones stretch for miles across the landscape. At first glance, they seem to point toward significant solar and lunar events, but upon closer, more precise measurement, a curious detail emerges. Many of these rows deviate by just a few degrees from the expected celestial target. For decades, the simplest explanation was human error. Perhaps the builders simply misjudged their sightlines, but what if we've been underestimating them? An emerging and fascinating theory suggests these slight deviations were not mistakes at all, but intentional corrections for a much more complex astronomical understanding. Perhaps they were accounting for atmospheric refraction, the way the Earth's atmosphere bends the light of a star or planet when it sits near the horizon, making it appear slightly out of position. Or maybe these alignments were tracking the slow, grand precession of the equinoxes, a 26,000-year cycle that gradually shifts the position of the stars over centuries. This would imply a level of long-term, recorded observation that seems almost impossible for a prehistoric culture, forcing us to question not just their methods, but the very depth of their celestial knowledge. It's a humbling reminder that a deviation we might dismiss as an error could actually be a sophisticated feature, a silent message from the past that we are only now beginning to comprehend. This leads us to one of the most enduring and profound mysteries. How did pre-literate societies achieve such breathtaking precision? The builders of Stonehenge left behind no blueprints, no engineering manuals, no written records of any kind. Yet they orchestrated the transport of 80-ton bluestones from mountains over 150 miles away and arranged them in a circle that captures the solstice sunrises and sunsets with pinpoint accuracy. The same is true for the incredible solar and stellar alignments embedded within the massive earthworks at Poverty Point in Louisiana, or the intricate stone calendars of the American Southwest. Without a written language to preserve and transmit complex data across generations, how was this knowledge so perfectly maintained? The answer likely lies in a powerful, and for us, almost unimaginable oral tradition. This wasn't just storytelling, it was a rigorous, formalized system of knowledge transfer. Elders would have trained apprentices for decades, using sophisticated mnemonic devices, songs, and chants to encode precise astronomical measurements, architectural ratios, and calendrical cycles. The structures themselves served as the ultimate mnemonic, a physical, three-dimensional textbook that each generation could study and use to teach the next. The loss of these oral traditions is perhaps the greatest wall between us and the ancient mind, a wall we may never fully breach, leaving us to stare in awe at the silent stones and wonder at the voices that once brought them to life. Equally puzzling are the mysteries of sudden abandonment. The magnificent city of Teotihuacan in Mexico, with its meticulously aligned avenue of the dead and massive pyramids to the sun and moon, was one of the largest cities in the ancient world, a thriving metropolis for centuries. Then, around the year 550, something happened. The city was deliberately and systematically burned, its great structures set ablaze and abandoned in what appears to be a single, cataclysmic event. Was it an invasion? There's no evidence of a foreign army. A peasant revolt against the priestly elite, perhaps, but another compelling theory points to the sky. A deep analysis of the climate record, through ice cores and sediment samples, suggests a period of severe and prolonged drought coincided with the city's collapse. For a culture that lived in delicate balance with the heavens, a failure of the rains would have been more than an ecological disaster. It would have been a theological catastrophe. The priests who derived their power from their ability to predict the seasons and appease the rain gods would have been seen as complete failures. their precise alignments and complex rituals would have been viewed as suddenly, terrifyingly impotent. The people may have risen up not just against their rulers, but against the entire cosmic order they represented, shattering the divine covenant and leaving the city to the desert winds. This illustrates the potent and fragile link between celestial belief and political power, a link that could uphold a civilization for centuries, but could shatter it in a single generation when the sky ceased to cooperate. The field of archaeoastronomy is also filled with more enigmatic puzzles that resist any easy explanation. The Nazca lines in Peru are a classic example. These vast geoglyphs, etched into the desert floor, form immense shapes of animals, plants, and geometric patterns so large they can only be seen from high in the air. Some of them clearly function as processional pathways, but others have defied a singular interpretation. While some researchers like Maria Reich argued convincingly that many lines align with solstice sunrises and the rising points of important stars, others remain deeply skeptical. The truth may be a complex fusion of astronomy, hydrology, and ritual. The lines might have been sacred pathways used in water ceremonies, aligning with celestial events to mark the timing of seasonal rivers flowing from the Andes. They could be a form of celestial map, a ritual calendar, and a prayer for water all at once. This multifunctionality is what makes them so difficult to decode with our modern, specialized minds. We want a single answer, but the ancient world was likely comfortable with layered, overlapping meanings where the practical and the spiritual were inseparable. These enduring mysteries have, inevitably, given rise to more speculative theories. Authors like Graham Hancock have proposed a grand, sweeping narrative of a lost global civilization with advanced astronomical knowledge, wiped out by a cataclysm like a comet impact around 12,000 years ago. He suggests the survivors of this civilization traveled the world, seeding knowledge among hunter-gatherer societies, and guiding the construction of the first monumental sites like Göbekli Tepe. It's a compelling story that captures the imagination, suggesting a hidden chapter in human history. However, mainstream archaeology and archaeoastronomy urge extreme caution here. There is currently no concrete, verifiable evidence, no artifacts, no genetic markers, no consistent cultural fingerprints to support such a unified, global precursor culture. The overwhelming evidence points toward independent innovation, different cultures facing similar pressures of agriculture, social complexity, and a shared human psychology, arrived at similar solutions for tracking time and understanding the heavens. The pyramids of Egypt and the pyramids of Mesoamerica are a testament not to a shared teacher, but to the shared human mind solving similar problems an ocean apart. This isn't to say the idea is impossible, but that it remains in the realm of fascinating speculation rather than settled science. The true story of humanity's past is likely just as incredible, showing the incredible innovative capacity of diverse cultures rising to the challenge of their world. The exciting truth is that our understanding is constantly evolving, and the next great discovery could be just one excavation away. New technologies are our greatest allies in this quest. Light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, is revolutionizing archaeology by allowing us to peer through dense jungle canopies to reveal entire hidden cities, road networks, and earthworks we never knew existed. Each new site offers fresh alignments to analyze, new patterns to decode. Furthermore, the growing threat of climate change is paradoxically revealing new clues. As glaciers and permafrost recede, they are exposing well-preserved artifacts, ancient campsites, and even human remains that have been frozen for millennia, offering unprecedented glimpses into the daily lives of prehistoric people. A single new discovery, a previously unknown star chart carved on a cave wall, a preserved oral history recorded on a newly found clay tablet, or a unique alignment revealed by LiDAR could suddenly make sense of a deviation at Karnak or clarify the purpose of a Nazca line. These unanswered questions are not a sign of our failure to understand, but rather the engine of exploration. They remind us that the ancient sky still has stories to tell, and they invite us to continue looking up and digging down with a sense of boundless curiosity and a humble appreciation for the profound ingenuity of those who came before us. From those first cities painstakingly aligned to the horizon to the glittering skyscrapers that define our modern skylines, humanity's relationship with the cosmos has been our longest and most defining conversation. We began in a place of profound terror, gazing up at a sky we believed was alive with capricious gods and ominous messages, and we responded not by hiding but by building. We raised ziggurats like cosmic mountains, engineered pyramids that captured the sun's first light, and laid out entire urban grids as sacred mirrors of the heavens. This was not mere architecture. It was a desperate and brilliant act of resilience, an attempt to impose order on chaos and plead for protection from the vast unknown. That primal fear of the sky, as we have seen, was the very engine that drove our earliest achievements in science, mathematics, and social organization, forging the path from scattered villages to the foundations of civilization itself. Yet, while our understanding has transformed, the core of that relationship remains. We no longer see a comet and fear the death of a king. We track its trajectory with powerful telescopes, marveling at the science. We've traded omen tablets for astrophysics and the whims of planetary gods for the elegant laws of orbital mechanics. But that deep, human urge to find our place within the cosmos, to seek patterns and meaning in the starry void, is as strong as ever. We have simply swapped the language of mythology for the language of mathematics, exchanging one map of the heavens for another. Our modern legacies, from the cardinal grids of capital cities to the principles of sustainable design that harness the sun's path, are direct descendants of those ancient practices, proving that our quest for harmony with the universe is a thread that runs unbroken through the tapestry of human history. So as you step outside tonight, I invite you to pause for a moment and simply look up. Gaze at those same stars that once filled the priests of Babylon with dread and inspired the architects of Teotihuacan to greatness. What do you see now? A random scattering of distant suns, or a deeper connection to the countless generations who stood precisely where you stand, filled with the same awe and the same questions? Their stones still whisper across the millennia, reminding us of our shared creativity, our enduring curiosity, and our timeless desire to feel at home under the immense and beautiful sky. If this journey into the origins of our cosmic fear and wonder has resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Share what you see when you look up. And if you're eager to continue exploring the profound mysteries that shape our world, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and may we never stop learning from the limitless sky.